Hey, I am Miss Matamoros, and this is
Rosana Morillo,
and you teach.
4th grade English and Spanish language arts.
Okay, and today we're going to go over one of your lessons and see how we can come up with a plan to help your students gain more understanding in regarding one of the concepts you have taught them before. What successes did students recently experience in the content area to build on?
We've been discussing informational text, and so far they are successful on identifying important details from the text, and they can express their opinions about the information they're reading.
Okay, sounds good. Are they able to do this in fictional text as well?
Yes, pretty much they've been successful. Like they can read the information, remember what they read, and discuss the most important part from what they're reading, whether it's fictional or non-fiction text.
Okay, so they have a good grasp of reliable evidence.
Yes.
Okay, what specific standard are you focusing on?
We are focusing on 4.11 figure 19D, which is making inference about text and using textual evidence to support understanding of the text.
Okay, and then how will you be able to make the students show this?
They are creating a T-chart where they have to on one side they write their text, the details from the text that was important, and on the other side of the T-chart they need to come up with an inference related to that information that they read. Of course, they need to use their schema, which is their previous knowledge, and the actual information to make a generalization or a different idea related to what they read, which is an inference.
Okay, makes sense. So they have to get a little bit from what they already know from their previous experiences to match it together with what the text says and be able to make their inference, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, and so for what the students really need to be able to know and do to master this standard of inferencing in non-fictional texts with textual evidence.
They should know what is an inference, what is an evidence, and the difference between them two. They should know the difference between a prediction and an inference. They should know active reading strategies, which means that they should be reading, stopping, thinking, and using different like visualization, questioning, commentaries, annotations of the text. And that's something that they've been practicing for 2 years at least, since 3rd grade, and they are being very successful on using those strategies as well.
Okay, so they're able to think as they're reading. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Would you say that they know the difference, that they know what an inference means?
I think that's something for them that's causing a lot of the problem with this standard, because they really don't know what it is. They don't know what is expected from them, and that's where we have to come up with a lot of modeling and actually thinking aloud with them so they can grasp it. And it takes time, but they end up knowing what it is and the difference between like prediction is a kind of inference, but it's not the inference they're expected to come up on 4th grade level when they're reading. So that's something that's kind of confusing for them.
Because a prediction could be right or wrong, but the inference kind of has to be right.
Exactly.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
How about with the reading level? Do you think some of it, are most of the students on reading level?
They are reading, at least, yes, because the Spanish language is the first language, so they're able to read on grade level. But the main struggles is with the comprehension.
Okay. And would you say that the students that are not on reading on the grade level have more difficulty inferencing?
Not necessarily, because sometimes they can like understand and very quickly and grasp everything, even though it's with by hearing the lesson and the reading out loud. They can like, it depends on the student, but they can definitely they're even though they're not reading on grade level, they definitely can should be able to make inferences.
Okay. So if it was okay, so they could even make inferences on books that are their reading level as well. So
yes.
They know the concept pretty
yes.
much. Okay. So how do assessment questions address the standard?
Well, during our quick checks or CFAs or benchmarks in STAR, we have several questions that will address the standard. Some of the questions are asking them for looking at a specific paragraph and read that paragraph to make an inference about. It could be an inference about the character, an inference about setting, an inference about the information the author is writing. It could be even an inference about the picture or the diagram and why the author decided to include it in the text. So yes, it's pretty much 85 to 90% of the text of the assessment is going to be inferencing.
Would you say that they're able to infer in fictional texts a lot better than in nonfiction?
I'll say it's the same, and I think, in my opinion, many times fiction could be a lot harder because, I mean, at least information is I mean, facts are pretty straightforward for them to understand. But then fiction, it's a lot of how the character is saying things in very specific details that if they miss that, they will come up with a different understanding or with a whole different like conclusion. And
depending on their background knowledge, they can come out with
Exactly.
different conclusions, different
Exactly.
inferences. And the thing is that they have 4 options and they have to pick one.
And many times, I mean, a lot of times they have 2 that could be, and then they have to select the best options, and that's another.
And I looked up some of the 4th grade STAR questions from last year and see how the questions were asked. And like you said, a lot of them point them to look at a specific area in the text. The picture on the paragraph 4 suggests. What does the information in paragraph 4 suggest about a person? Or after reading the information in paragraph 4, the reader can conclude.
Even with a sentence.
Yeah, the sentence in the box shows that. The following sentences shows that because of his work, the person is. Okay. So how can you integrate these types of questions how do you integrate these types of questions into your lessons?
I always add it as a like demonstration of understanding. They have to answer different questions after reading, and I always include those kind of inferencing because I know that's what they need to master. to actually understand what's going on. And then that helps a lot for them to be able to being exposed to that a lot throughout the year. So it's working and it's helping a lot, but I'm seeing myself having to do a lot of modeling demonstration and going back and repeat, like, so they can actually understand and being able to do it independently. They're more confident doing it with a partner, but independently many times they're like struggling a lot because they don't feel like they can do it by themselves.
They're not confident enough.
Exactly, because I mean they feel like maybe if I'm not, I mean they always want to be right, so especially fourth graders, so whenever they have to come up with an inference, they are like, oh, because they know that it might be right, but it might be wrong, and I don't want to be wrong. So that's something else, like the confidence and the fact that they always want to be right, and they just want to think fast, and many times that causes them to be wrong because they don't take their time to actually process the information, think about what they know, think about the text, and then come up with an inference. So, yes.
Okay. It sounds very through, and that they do need a lot of modeling. How would you teach them to give themselves time to think before shouting out an answer really quick?
It takes for them to understand that it's not a race, it's not a competition, it's not like they're gonna receive a trophy or anything. I always repeat that, but I always give like thinking time.
Don't answer yet.
Exactly. Like, let's think about the question. Let's think about the information we just read. Let's think about it for a minute, and then they need that quiet time, and that definitely helps them a lot to just stop and think before trying to answer.
Or have them write it down. That way they're thinking about their.
No, definitely they have to write it down. That's part of the process. I mean, that's nothing to question, that they will have to do it. First, if they think, then they can share it with a partner, with a friend. Then we can share it loud. Then they have to write it down.
All right. So now let's look at the student work that you brought. Okay, show me which one is the high student.
It was this one.
Okay, so what is the high student able to do?
So you can see here the T chart, and here we have the text evidence, and here what the student inferenced about them. In 3 out of the 5, he was able to provide a good detail with appropriate inference. And this is was one of the highest students that I have so far, and he was able to provide a detail from the text, which was important, not just interesting or what, like, it was a good detail. And then make a generalization using that information and using what they know. And then here he was able to do the same using the information from the text and what the student knew. He was able to do another inference related to the information that it was discussed on the selection that they were reading.
So it wasn't a book, it was like a 1-2 page story text?
It was like, yes, it was like a 3 pages informational passage.
Okay. And whenever they were he was making these inferences, where they pointed out at where they needed to go to make the inferences, or they did just kind of see, hey, this evidence right here can give me an inference? Is that how they did it, or were they pointed out where to go?
No, they're pretty much doing it independently. I let them, like, it's part of the active reading. Whenever they come up with an information that they think is important, it makes them make an inference. They need to stop and they need to use it and show me here in the T-chart the text that makes them have an inference and their actual inference. So they are pretty much making it independently, without me telling them make an inference about this or that.
Yeah. So would you say this student would be, since he pretty much did it on his own, he picked the evidence, he came up with the inference, would you say that he would be able to come up with the right inference if given the evidence?
I'll say so, because
coming up with the evidence and the inference is already pretty hard, because he's creating everything.
Yes.
So if you give him part of it, would you say he should be able to?
Yes, definitely, because if he was successful doing this independently, I don't think it will be a problem for him to do, whether come up with an inference or whether if you provide an inference, they need to find the good detail that will support that inference. That's another case.
And how about this over here? Is this just kind of helping you know if they understood what they were reading?
Yes, because this is kind of a poster presentation that they do about what they're reading, and we are covering different skills at once, because that's what we do in reading. So here the student was doing the main idea and supporting details for each section of the selection, and then quick gist or summary, and then here they were answering questions about the text. And that's pretty much what they were doing. And they have to of course make the visual representations about what was the text about.
Okay, and this is the title of the text?
Yes, making a splash.
Okay, now let's look at the low student, or the below average student.
Okay, here is the word, and here we have the inference that the student
so how come the other student did his T-chart? This student did bubbles. Is that something that she didn't follow directions?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, because the instructions were to do the T-chart, and that's the way that I model myself. So, but at the same time, since reading is thinking and an inference is a thinking process, well, the student decided to represent it this way, to what was her thinking during that time. And that could be one of the causes for her not to be completely successful in doing
because I can see how a student might be able to do it like this correctly, explaining my inference is because
exactly.
But in a student that's not understanding the concept very well, that way she did it can go wrong.
Exactly.
Okay. So what are some differences in the student work that you see between this one and that one?
Definitely this one, she tried to make an inference, but and sometimes it sounds like an inference, like a good understanding of what an inference is, but many times it's just repeating information from the text that was already in the text, or any of them have explanation of the evidence, like what was the supporting detail for your inference. It's just my thinking, pretty much my opinions many times, just opinions about the text, but not an actual inference or non any of them has any supporting details for the inference that she made. That's pretty much it. And of course, the way she represented it is different because the other student followed instructions with the text, a T-chart with a text and inference, and she decided to represent it as a thinking process, which it is. But
you think she would have been more successful if she had followed the T-chart?
Definitely, because the T-chart is very like self-explanatory text,
yeah, like you have
and
to
inference, and then that way she will remember to include the evidence.
And what would you say that the student was able to understand here?
Here, she was able to understand that inference comes from her. It's not like from the text. In like, I'll say 2 out of the 5 that she tried to do, and she was able to pretty much just restate many of the things that happened of that were explained on the informational text. So that's something that she was able to do.
Recall?
Yes.
Is that what you mean? She was able to recall important information in the text? Okay, but not able to... So she was able to get the evidence, but not quite make the inference. Right. Okay. And so what do you think it was one of her misunderstandings?
Not providing evidence, and many times not actually making an inference, but just stating an opinion about what she thought about the subject of the passage.
Out of those 5, would you say 3 are an opinion and 2 are just evidence? Okay.
Like
so
exactly.
she needed to okay. She did it like separate processes.
Yes.
On there. Okay, so let's look at the gaps that this student might have. What are the gaps that we see between our students that did not answer the questions correctly and those that did? So pretty much, what is the difference between those 2 examples? And if we can look at the inside of this one, because this one looks like it's a lot more through. This one has a summary, 1 main idea, answer questions,
and answer some of the questions. Yeah.
And this looks like a summary, right?
And it's
or is she just putting several main ideas all together?
No, here it's more like information instead of a main idea.
Okay. And I think she also did not follow the graph that you have for main idea.
The graphic organizer.
This is supporting details. Also known as evidence, which is lacking over there in the inferencing. So it starts here, and the end product is different because since the beginning, because she's not able to make the correct main ideas, and she didn't answer that question. Okay, it makes sense. How would you rate her summary?
How will I
rate her summary? Did she summarize the information correctly, or is she just restating the text? Or is she not including the beginning? She's not including the end?
She is she is focusing more on describing the character or the subject of the informational text, talking about what he likes and what he did, and how he felt proud of himself, but it's not giving us the information about the main ideas from the beginning, middle, and end of the text.
So she described the person in the text,
Exactly.
but not the events that happened.
Exactly.
Okay, so she's still lacking in that area as well. Yeah, if she's not able to, anyone can think, hey, if she's not able to do this, because inferencing is higher order thinking.
Yes.
So if she's not able to get the main idea and make a summary, then she's gonna have great difficulty.
Exactly. With that inferencing.
What would you say is the highest leverage and misconception to fix?
Okay, it's provide correct evidence to support the inference. And the low, you said? Understanding the difference between an opinion, an idea, and an inference.
Because they have many. They have to study main opinion, fact, main idea, supporting details, predictions, and here comes inferencing.
Exactly.
And then they might get a little bit, oh wait, what is this?
Yeah, that's what's happening pretty much, because I mean it's everything at once. When we're reading, that's what happens. So for them it's been like a little bit difficult for them to understand and trace the line between what's one thing, what's another, because it's too much at once.
And you also look at the concepts. You don't just look at inferencing in one day. You look at different concepts in one day.
Exactly.
I can see that being a little bit confusing for them. What does the data tell you is the highest leverage?
It will be able to articulate their inference using their own ideas with background knowledge.
And do you think these students have enough background knowledge to help them make those inferences?
Sometimes, because many times the kind of texts that they need to read are very about different information that they don't know or they're not exposed to, and that definitely will be another thing to consider. The low, and they're able to state relabel ideas to the text. They are on topic, they're expressing ideas related to the topic.
Okay, so even though she wasn't able to make her inferences, she still stayed on topic.
Exactly.
So she was still right that the text talked about those things.
Exactly.
She just wasn't able to think farther. Okay. And I took a look at the last benchmark at the figure 19 questions. And I did see that 14 out of 25 students were not able to identify the evidence the inference was requiring. So the question gave him an inference, and it wanted evidence. It wanted the students to pick the evidence. The inference in the question was very specific to the story. So they had to go back and read. And 11 out of 20, in another question, 11 out of 25 students were confused in the wording in the question. They confused fame with talent, and others picked the answer that related most to the word in the question that got them distracted. So they saw this word and it confused them, and they picked the answer that had to do with the wrong word that they needed to focus on. Okay. So on these, where they were not nonfiction, they were fiction stories, correct? From last CFA.
Last year.
Okay. So from the data here, it shows that they, like you had told me before that fiction can be even a little bit more difficult than nonfiction to make inferences. So that's an area that does need to be worked on in both genres equally.
Yes.
Okay, so what would you say is the critical mass of error? What did unsuccessful students struggle to do for this standard?
They struggle to differentiate between what's an opinion, an idea, and an inference. And also, a lot of them struggle with the textual evidence to support their inference. Also, they have a lack of language to explain what they mean or to actually further, like, explain their thinking further a little bit more. And they're unable to identify like the relatable evidence to what they're trying to express many times.
So it sounds like they're not able to, they're not able to make the inference or get the evidence, correct? But if given several inferences and given several evidence, you think they'll be able to match the inference with the evidence if given both?
Yes, I'll say they'll be more successful that way because they have everything in front of them and they just need to think about
how
the
relationships.
They connect. Exactly. They're very good on that, finding relationships, like, oh, this is talking about
making
cloud,
that connection,
so I can see here. But when
they
have to do it by themselves, that's when it's hard.
But they can make connections by themselves?
Yes.
Okay. And that could be something that could help them to be able to make those inferences. So let's plan a reteach. Should this be a guided discourse or a model?
I think after looking at what they're able to do and not to do, I think it will be like a guided discussion. It will be better because it's not like everyone having this struggle, just kind of like a half of them. So it could be several groups where...
And since this is a topic that is so, they need to do it a lot, so they need to know it 100%.
Yes.
So maybe small group you'll be able to get through them better than doing the whole group.
Whole group, exactly. So it would be easier for me to go back and model again with another text, and then also have them look through what they did and see if they can catch what's the problem is with what they think is an inference, and go from there. Like, they can evaluate their own work after me modeling and showing them.
So showing them an exemplar of how it looks like and how it should be done in a smaller. Would you use would you use the same text or a different text?
I'll say for me modeling, it will be first a different text, and then for the exemplar it will be one of the same one that they did, so they can see their difference. Like, they can see what this student that was able to do it correctly and what my work looks like, and see if they can connect, like, oh, I'm just stating facts instead of an inference. Oh, I'm just telling maybe an inference, but there's not supporting evidence. There's not a
So having them reflect on what went wrong themselves.
Yes.
So I hear you saying that students will be given the same text to make more inferences, but first they have to explain. They have to explain with a different text, and you'll also explain to them how to make a difference with a different text, right? And they'll be able to catch their own mistakes with their own foldable and fix
Yes.
their own inferences.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you will have evidence for students to be able to scaffold the inference process. So you go through that gradual release in that whole small group and you go through that whole process. And would you also prompt them with keywords to be able to make those inferences?
Yes, I definitely think that they need that, maybe like a sentence stamp, some way that they can remember how to, and that if they need 2 parts to state it, they need the actual inference and their evidence. So that way, if they have a sentence that they can go back and use, they'll do it better and they'll do it a complete inference with evidence. If they have that.
Okay. Okay, great. Let's plan for it. What do you want students to be able to articulate?
They should be able to explain how they know when they have a good inference, like the parts of it, and not just use the details as an inference. And they should be able to identify what is not an inference.
What's an opinion and what's an idea,
Exactly.
right? So, an opinion from a main idea, pretty much, to actual differences. Okay, you said not use details as an inference, correct? All right, so I'm gonna give you some questioning strategies that will be that will guide you on how you can prompt, and that will help you for your reteach. And you can prompt the students with these questions for them to be able to make their inferences as you are doing your small group. So as you are showing students how to do it, you can ask them, how do you know what good evidence looks like? How can you identify what good evidence is? And how does this evidence relate to your inference? So especially to the one that the one that only stated evidence and not an inference, you can ask her, okay, so given that, what would be an inference you can make about, and then you tell her about what, because she came up with the evidence but wasn't able to come up with the inference, maybe because she needed to know in a keyword, like about what, about his job, about his life, about his personality, about his family, about what. So that's a keyword that you can, and with inferences you really have to read the text through to be able to think about what aspect in the text you'll be making the inference about. So then you can ask them, is this related to your idea? Is this idea related to your inference? Now, would you, with the students that were not able to make the inferences successfully, would you go back to main idea and supporting details?
Yes, because that's something that definitely they need to understand, because they need to, when they read, they need to know what was the story about and what are some important details that support that main idea. So definitely, if they're struggling with that, they'll struggle with the inferencing part.
Okay. Something else that you could do also is show them an inference and ask, is this an inference? An opinion? Actually, you can have cards with opinion, main ideas, and inferences. Is this an inference, an opinion, or a main idea?
Yeah, that's true.
How do you know? Explain it through. And that could probably help them as well. And it will help them with opinion, it will help them with main idea, and it will help them with inferencing.
Exactly. Everything at once.
You can also prompt them to go to a specific paragraph. What can be a good inference about, and then give them what to make the inference about. Based on paragraph, what can you infer about? So, and these are all using the sentence, the questioning stems from the start.
Okay.
So they get used to that. And like I had told you before, which of these is an opinion, which of this is an inference, and having cards for them. And maybe if you have an opinion, you can ask them, okay, so how can you change this to make it an inference? Or what is the difference between an inference or an opinion? Give the students a chance to practice by giving them a set of inferences. Then you can return as a group and ask them to, when you give them the inference cards, you can ask them to pick evidence that supports the inference, and then go back and have the students explain to you why they picked that evidence for the inference, or vice versa. You can give them evidence and have them come up with the inference.
Yeah.
So this is what I have for you. I have some cards. Now these are for fiction, but they're also helpful. They have the paragraph, and they have the questioning for them. So, and this is what I was doing before with the class.
Okay.
It tells them a little paragraph. The inference can be about where they're at, what the person is doing, what the person is feeling, and then they'll ask them where was the person? What was the person feeling? So it prompts them to look at a specific aspect in the text, and then it'll ask them, how do you know? So this would be a good starting point to do with the students that are struggling the most, because these are very short. I would probably not use it with the medium students, or I wouldn't. I would use them with the ones that are struggling the most. It'll be a good starting point, and then you can go from there, scaffold, and do more. Here, I'll let you look at them.
Yes. This is awesome. And on Spanish.
And then these are in English, and these are for fiction as well. They're pretty much they're almost the same, but this one has the text and it has the inference. So they have to match the evidence that goes with the inference.
Okay.
Or and then you can mix and match. You can give them the evidence and have them come up with the inference. Or you can even start with both. Have them match up the inference with the evidence, and then just give them the evidence and have them, or you can do half of them match, and then the other half have them come up with the inference themselves of what is going on.
I like it. I think it's a good, even for the guided reading, it's a good exercise before starting with the lesson, for them to be able to review and to practice the skill that they're
it can wake them up and be like, okay, well, I remember. Okay, so an inference is not an opinion. It has to be related to the evidence. It's not a main idea, so it's not going to be in the text. It's something I have to come up with.
Exactly.
So it can help them.
Yeah.
Well, okay, this is the end of it. Thank you so much for having me help you and for coming up with
these activities, because that definitely will help a lot, and I'll use them
Awesome.
for sure.